Welcome to Energy in the Room. I'm Katie. Join me as I sit down with the inspiring voices shaping our energy future. Together, we'll share real stories, big challenges, and honest advice from those leading the transition. Let's dive in. Today, I'm welcoming Marc Barrington, a seasoned leader with decades of experience across renewables, carbon market, retail, and decarbonization strategy. Marc is currently the General Manager of New Markets at Elinta Energy. Hello, Marc.
G'day, Katie. How are you?
Very good, thank you. How are you doing?
Not too bad, although the decades of experience does make me feel a little bit older.
I had a feeling you might say something like that. For those who aren't familiar with your background, can you just tell us a bit about your background and how you got to where you are?
Yeah, so I spent the 90s working at NM Rothschild for the most part, and it was on the precious metals desk there, and then moved into energy in the early 2000s. So 25 years now of experience in energy across the value chain, from retail and trading, development, operations. So I guess bring a unique blend of commercial and technical leadership to the table. A lot of my work has been building new ventures inside large businesses, which is interesting. It has both the challenges of, I suppose, entrepreneurialism, but also fighting for oxygen inside a larger organisation. But I find that really interesting, actually, that nexus, or the fight that goes on within inside businesses, and needing to get stakeholders really engaged in what you're doing.
Brilliant. And so going back to when you started in the industry, was it a planned entrance into the market, or was it more accidental?
Yeah, it wasn't accidental, but it wasn't necessarily planned either. I was looking at the growth of the energy sector in the US, the UK, and then how Australia disaggregated its energy markets, all through the mid to late 90s, and it always really interested me. And I suppose more from the fact that I never really saw myself as wanting to be a trader that was just trading numbers off a screen. I really wanted to be more involved in the commerce of things, and I saw energy as being a good way to take the skill sets that I had in trading environments of precious metals and commodities, and bring something new to the table in managing electricity risk. And then really build a new career in the Australian energy space. So I started in trading at a really interesting time at AGL Energy, because typically it was the gas company, it's the New South Wales Gas Company, and then when I started, only just acquired.
What year was this?
I'm going to say 2001, but the back end of 2001.
Yeah.
So they just acquired ETSA Power, and built up an electricity book in South Australia, but they'd also been involved in New South Wales. So I almost from day one got really hooked on the complexity and the consequences of decisions, and I guess I really grew into roles where strategy meets execution. That always really excited me.
And I think for those who are listening, something that, like, the main theme of this podcast, I'd like to be around, like, your growth and advice for people that are growing in the industry, advice for people that are in leadership or want to get into leadership. So given that, what is like a pivotal moment in your career that you can draw upon, a bit of something that struck a chord with you, whether that is a failure or a success?
Yeah, I guess having near failures is always a really good way to learn. And so I was leading a major asset project that was facing delay and possibly failure. It was a large asset, but on a customer site. So, you know, you had that balance of not only needing to get the project right, but the customer at the same time, you know, potentially the impact to them was impacting their day-to-day operations. So, you know, that experience, you know, I had to unify both the technical, the commercial, and the legal aspects in my own company, with our contractors and with the customer. And I suppose that was the first time where, for me, there was a recognition that leadership is really about getting people aligned, to share your vision, and not just about managing tasks. Tasks are important, and the quality of how you carry those out really is. But
Mm.
you can't do it alone, and you've really got to build, you know, this coalition of the willing.
Yeah. Yeah. And have you got any advice on how you, I guess, like, yeah, do you think that's a natural thing that people can be like a leader and a visionary and those types of people that just get people behind them naturally? Or do you feel like you had to hone that skill set? And have you got any advice around that?
There are certainly people out there that just have a natural charm and charisma, and it just comes naturally. That's not me, and anyone that you know, works with me. No, it's something that I know I need to grow, and I always need to, you know, develop. I think you need to identify the need. I remember actually one of my, at the early stages where the 360 leadership reviews started, early 2000s was the first time I'd seen it. I remember the first bit of feedback I had was that, you know, my peers, subordinates, and my managers saw me as being high on red, you know, and red are the more pushing things through characteristics, you know,
Yeah.
driving, forging ahead without listening to others. And I really, you know, took it on that I had to reduce those and build more of the collaborative styles. So, you know, yeah, I don't think it originally came naturally to me, but with necessity being the mother of invention, you know, that's just almost the only way you can work. And one of the things I've found interesting is culturally, Australians operate differently to Americans,
Mm.
to Europeans, certainly to, you know, folks in Asia. We are much more collaboratively led. Whereas, you know, in Asia, they expect a more directive style of leadership, and kind of in Europe, it's somewhere in between. But yeah, the combative style leadership in Australia won't work,
Mm.
and so, you know, you really need to adapt.
Yeah. So yeah, is it called the Myers-Briggs test to all those personality questions? And it's
Mm.
red, blue, yellow, and green, I think, are the main colours, aren't they?
It's funny. I've
So
been talking
you're
with our talent team actually, and I noticed that, you know, they're coming back into, you know, I won't say fashion, that sort of devalues it a little bit,
Mm.
but I think getting a deeper understanding of the folks that you're going to be employing and working with, and understanding what their motivations are, is really important. And so
Yeah.
certainly, you know, for me, I'm really looking for those when I recruit for folks.
Yeah, I think some people think those kinds of tests are a bit of a waste of time and you should get to know the people in your team and things like that. But I think there is definitely a use for those kinds of reflective
Mm.
tests. Test is probably the wrong word, but I think, well, yeah, when you're building out a team, I don't think pre-interview they should be done. But I think, you know, once someone's started in your team and you're having you're learning to work together, I think understanding the way people work and
Mm.
their personality traits is really helpful.
Yeah.
Um, but so moral of the story is you're naturally a driver, a red energy person, as they say.
Mm.
And you've worked on that a little bit to be more collaborative.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I hope so. I hope that's what people would say.
Yeah, we'll speak to your colleagues afterwards. And I think we've had this conversation a little bit before in previous talks. Want to know what like drives you in working in the industry and your position now? Like, what are you passionate about within the sector? I know you're not particularly, for want of a better phrase, an eco warrior or a mission led person. So yeah, what are you passionate about within the sector?
Yeah. To some respects, oh, let me just deal to that to start with. I really loathe the tribalism sometimes that we get in our space. That you are, if you're for one, that means automatically you have to be against the other. Um,
Mm,
so I, what I enjoy, what I'm passionate about, is the idea that energy is a public need. It's a necessity, whether it's mums and dads or whether it's industry, and it
yeah,
touches every part of our life. And so the idea or the challenge of making it more reliable, more affordable, with a lower emissions profile, and it's all three, and not just one, is imperative. And you know, she started at the outset. I've seen altruism has a very short shelf life in the political space and the energy space, and
mm,
I saw it a lot in the lead up to sort of 2007. Really high intention from companies and governments to deal to decarbonisation, and then a lot of that just got lost during the GFC, and it got lost because um, you know people go straight to what matters most to them, their families, and how they can support their families. And I think I've seen another cycle occur, just in recent times, where we started to see again this sort of pushback on on all decarbonisation as being the main topic. And I think what will be long lasting for the sector, or a better way for the sector, is to focus on trying to get all three right.
hmm
And I think that's possible, and that really aligns with me. I'm pragmatic. I'm not ideological, and I care about real outcomes. And what drives me is certainly the role I've got at the moment, which is being able to lead a team that's working with business in Australia and helping them to decarbonise, but to make their own operations more energy efficient. And that's a cost saving, but there's also decarbonisation saving as well, or decarbonisation benefit. And that's what drives me.
yeah, yeah. I think you've kind of answered it there, but I was going to say, like, what say you're very pragmatic. So what kind of challenges like really get you going? Like, yeah, what's something that's going to keep you up at night? Whether it's like a day-to-day challenge that you have with the team, or is it a bigger picture thing with yeah, the wider industry?
Mm. Well, look, I sleep very well, but I like sort of multi-variable, messy challenges,
Mm.
and sort of always have done, and I guess gravitated towards it in my career. Um, I've liked working in environments that have been untested before. So I was
Mm.
um, an early arriver, if you like, into carbon markets. Um, you know, really saw the potential for environmental markets to grow, and the benefit that adding liquidity does to that space. So I really saw that early on, and that I was able to take what I learned in the precious metals markets in the 90s of working at Rothschild, which was a great company in that it supported mid-tier miners, and trying to run their hedging programs in the Asian market. The way to It was very hard to access liquidity. So where did we go? We went to the Tokyo Commodities Exchange and other markets to try and get that liquidity. And I saw the benefit that gave both the miners, but to our company at the bank at the time.
Mm.
And likewise, promoting liquidity in environmental markets, I think really helped. Um, and so I think um, for, uh, you know, my career, being able to look at niche opportunities and trying to expand them, I've just always found really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And building teams that where I can help them navigate some of the uncertainty,
Mm.
because it's a it's a huge the energy transition is a huge task, but just so interesting and just so much opportunity. Um, both for technologies, for the development of technologies, whether it's generated inside our own
Mm.
country or from overseas, but even just career-wise for people. I can't think of another sector where you've got regulatory, environmental, people, being when you go and talk with landholders that are looking at, well, what does it mean to have wind turbines on my property, or
Mm.
having a transmission tower through my backyard. Working with them of how to make that good. When they're talking to you about what does it mean for the traffic in my area or the dust. Like I remember once talking to a farmer's wife, and she was very upset about a wind farm that we were building, and it was in sort of outback South Australia, another place, Katie, you'll need to travel to. Love the
Yeah,
red dirt,
sure is.
and uh, and she loved the idea of the wind farm, absolutely loved it. Just didn't like the impacts to her washing, so we made sure we got her a dryer, and she was very happy with that.
That is problem solving.
It is problem solving, but it's also understanding that the transition impacts everyone
Mm.
at every level, and it's not for us as a sector to determine whether that matters or not, because
Yeah,
everyone's going to be a part of it, right?
yeah, yeah. And um, when was the last time you went out and spoke to a landowner?
Actually,
And do
yes.
you miss it if it was a while ago?
Look, I was fortunate enough. I was out there about 4 weeks ago, just on the Eyre Peninsula in getting South Australia. I really enjoy it. We've got some great people inside Elinta Energy that have very good backgrounds and deep backgrounds in regional Australia,
Hmm.
and it's always great, working with them, working with our community team. Just the insights that they take to what we do. So yeah, I
Yeah.
really, again, I didn't mention that last time, but again, if you think of and it sound like I'm promoting energy as a career, but which I am, I suppose. But
Yeah.
the diversity of people uh, that you come across is huge,
Hmm.
and some
Mm.
of the most brilliant, intelligent people I've ever come across have been, my peers in the places I've worked at.
Mm. Yeah. And I guess like when you go out and speak to a landowner, like it keeps you grounded in a way, and it keeps your perspective there that like, yes, energy does affect absolutely everyone and it is people's livelihoods. And whilst you can look at the bigger picture of constructing this huge wind farm, it affects people's washing lines and how clean their washing
Mm,
is, and right down to the
yeah, sure.
granular stuff.
But
Yeah.
most often there's an answer. In energy, that most often there's an answer if you come to a table with an understanding that there's always trade-offs.
Mm.
And I think that's something I always keep in the back of my mind is, well, what's the trade-off here, and what's the most important thing to this person, and how do we make it happen?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's great. Um, and then, yeah, so back to your leadership and team management, people management.
Hmm.
Um, Direct question here. What are the top three ingredients for a successful team? And how, if at all, has your opinion changed on this or evolved over time?
Hmm. Uh, I think it's become more certain. But if I think of the top three, one is clear purpose. Everyone on the team has to know what you're doing and why. And the best work on that was Simon Sinek when he did the three whys, which like someone once said to me, nothing's new, and I think that was largely robbed from Viktor Frankl, but needing this reason of why we're doing what we're doing, and the
Yeah.
fortunate thing is in energy, you don't have to think too hard to understand why what we're doing is so important. Um, I think psychological safety is really important. So
Mhm.
folks feeling they have the space to speak up, uh, to challenge. I think that's really important, and it's an obligation on people,
Mhm.
and it's not optional. You got to debate, because um, there's no playbook really in
Mhm.
what we're doing, and energy is evolving all the time. one of the first wind farms that I was involved with, its grid application process was something like 3 weeks. Now a grid application process for a wind farm, despite all the best efforts of the TNSPs, can be upwards of 9 to 12 months. That's changing, and then the role the community plays and the respect that you need to give that community.
Mm.
Being able to debate and work with people is really important. And then finally, um, execution discipline. That's really important. So you've got to have the processes in place um, to get things done.
Yeah.
That's the important. So
Yeah. Do you
so I
mean
think
like saying doing what you're saying you're going to do? Like if you make a commitment, you fulfill that.
yeah, I had an American boss once when I was at Senvion, and he always used to talk about the say-do ratio.
Mm.
He's very clear on that, and I think that's great. Yeah, that's something that stuck with me. And I know this is a career podcast. Um, I've always picked up little things from different leaders that I've worked with, and colleagues as well. And I think that's a good way to grow, because you sort of pick up the great little insights, if you like, that generate your own style.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. We've got a handful of core values and sayings here. And do what you say you're going to do is a key one. What's your for people that are, I guess, first time managers and finding their way through management? What's a piece of advice, your best bit of advice for those people?
Um, well, there's two books that I really like. And again, they've been
Yes,
recommended to me over the
love a
years,
bit
and
of
they're
reading.
probably a little bit old these days. But the first one is called The First 90 Days.
Hmm.
And it's about, because often when you move from a non-leadership role to a leadership role, or an old role to a new role, you don't give yourself the time to think, well, I've now got a new slate. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to plan, but also recognizing that the people that you work with need to experience some of that change as well. So the first 90 days is a great book to kind of let you reflect on what your new style is going to be like in a new role. The other one I really like is called Strengths Finder, and a really good friend of mine got me onto that again a number of years ago. But it's basically, I think it's the leader's obligation to find what best suits the working style often of the person you're working with. And I really like that. Napoleon. There's no such thing as bad soldiers, only bad officers, and I think that's in some ways quite true.
To yeah, to a certain extent, yeah.
And so,
So
look, I think the advice I'd give them, listen first, set your expectations clearly, um, and this notion of um, uh, you know always understand that people watch you and what you do, much much more than you think.
mm, you're under the spotlight now.
Hmm.
So the first 90 days and the Strengths Finder.
Yeah.
Okay, two good reads. All right, I'll buy them now. Um, so and then from your perspective, what's the best bit of advice you've ever received? And it might be one of those bits that you just mentioned.
Um, Look, I think for me, there's been two, but they weren't like like a quote or anything. The first one was, I remember I'd only just taken on running the precious metals desk at Rothschild, and the treasurer at the time was a guy called David Rowe, who would be one of the best leaders I think I've ever seen. I had one of those days. I don't know if you've ever seen them, or your listeners have ever seen them, but when you see these dejected looking traders on open outcry where there's tickets everywhere, and they're just, I had one of those days, only it was in a trading room, and it was a market making desk. And I absolutely had a shocker. And Dave brought me into his office, and I thought, I'm clearly going to be fired
Yeah.
today, because it was a shocking, horrible, horrible day. And what he did was he just sat me down and said, how do you feel? Where do you think you went wrong? What would you do differently? And we spoke for 20, 30 minutes, and at the end of it, it was, well, make sure you come back tomorrow. Let's do it again.
Yeah.
And that I've always kept that with me as a, the best way to lead someone is help them self-reflect.
Yeah.
And then the other one was I'd done a residential course at Melbourne Business School, and there was a professor called Clarence Pinto de Gama, who unfortunately has now passed away. But he took me aside and he said, you got some reasonably good insights. You're clearly passionate about what you're doing, but he said, well, what are you going to do? What does the next 10 years look like? And I took that as I joined Energy, and I wanted to the idea of growing businesses, and that sort of led me into starting these sort of small businesses inside big businesses, and two guys really that sort of gave me their time, if you like. And I think for any leader, that's the best thing you can give.
Yeah. And I guess like the first scenario I take from that is like support, and like as long as you show up and you're doing the right things and you've got the right attitude and you've got a manager that, it's funny, like you thought you were going to go get a bollocking and actually he totally brought you up. So support, and then the other one is like pushing you outside your comfort zone, which that's definitely something I need from a manager, is someone to encourage me and make me think more and push myself further. So yeah, very good. Two very influential people on your career then, I guess.
Yeah, very much so.
Good. What is one myth about energy that you'd love to bust?
Well, one that the energy transition is costless, or that it's easy. I think it's possible. And I think, like I said before around trade-offs, every solution has trade-offs. And for the transition, it's cost, reliability, time, land use even. And so the that doesn't make it easy, and it doesn't make it risk-free. And so, I guess, good leadership to me is navigating those trade-offs, doing it with a level of transparency, and doing it decisively. I think that's how I see the need, I suppose, for this space.
Yeah, well, I think it's good that you're saying earlier about Australian work culture is very collaborative, because I think it's absolutely needed in this kind of environment, and the complexities that we're faced with in the energy sector, for sure. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been really insightful, especially for myself, and no doubt for people that are going to listen. And always ask, who do you think we should speak to next? Who would you like to hear from?
It's funny. I knew you were going to ask me this, and I'd already planned this person, but I actually saw him yesterday, would you believe, at a course we were both at. There's a guy called Simon Yule, and Simon and I have worked with each other in 3 different companies now. He's sort of, I'd say, late early stage career, but I think a great leader, a great participant and driver of the energy transition. Heck of a nice bloke, but has some deep insights, I think, into how to improve, both what we do in a engineering and delivery sense, but I think he'd also have some great insights on building a career in energy.
Yeah. We need the good stories down in the trenches.
Yeah, and there's plenty.
Yeah, there sure are. All right, well, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Katie.